Well, that's something of a theme song for book lunch, which is a little bit different every time I play it, of course. Hope the sound is okay. I'm going to check with my ace producer, Laurie Strickland, and her dog Chester. See how they're doing out there, the sound and everything. Gonna continue our discussion of John Updike's Rabbit novels. And this is episode 4 of the series. And if you'll notice all along, you might notice that it appears on the face of it, right, that we're doing an episode of novel because there's Rabbit Run, Rabbit Redux, Rabbit is Rich, Rabbit at Rest, and then the final finale, the woefully underrated, wonderful novella from 2000, 2001, around the September 11th era there, Rabbit Remembered. We're going to cover all these, but you'll notice it seems like there's a one-to-one relationship between episodes and novels because we're now entering Rabbit at Rest, and that is the 4th novel, and this is episode 4. But it's not quite, I mean, yes, that's true, but that was not intentional. And there is a non-linear dimension to our series because we're going to go all over the place with the novels, and as well as discussion of culture in America in those years. And so, you would be right you're partly right to guess that because there is, we're doing the novels in order, and it's always a good idea if you're doing novels as complex as Updike's, to do a whole episode for one novel. In fact, a lot of these novels in the series really require more than a single episode, which is why we will return to them. Today we're going to talk more about Rabbit is Rich before we make the plunge into Rabbit at Rest. And I'm going to change things up a little bit to make it a little less predictable here. And I'm going to show some images, some video of Updike talking about his life and work. There's a reason why I'm showing this up front, so I'm going to go get the shelf and put it on the seat, and we'll look at. There's a reason for everything. You'll see. So. Here we go. See what we got here.
The first one is...
Okay, this is because John Updike was the kind of writer he was, meaning commercially successful and highly thought of in many quarters. And also, as I've said in earlier episodes, he comes out of this very single-minded perspective on the aesthetics of prose, which he learned from the New Yorker, and he was a part of with the New Yorker when he finally joined them in the 50s and 60s. The world of E.B. White, and studying at Harvard and then at Oxford, although he studied visual art at Oxford, drawing and painting, I think. He comes out of that world, so there's a sense in which his craft and his art is I'm trying to find the right words. He's the that world. If you look at that as a world of Bennett Cerf, William Shawn, Wally Shawn's father, that world, whatever we can say many things about that world, of course, both positive and negative, of course. But one of the overriding objective virtues of that world is that artists like Updike that train in that world always had at least one eye towards being relatable, towards trying to create something that can speak to people not speak to everybody, and not be dumbed down, as we would say today, and not compromising, not compromising excellence or integrity as they saw it, but without compromising, those ideals. They want it to be, again, relatable and communicate something of the world. And a lot of that energy, that kind of energy of that era went into, I think, making, in this case, fiction that's has a staying power over decades, and I believe it'll continue to have staying power and have relevance. Actually, after all, the main character, Rabbit Harry Engstrom, is a deeply flawed character. And even though he's a creature of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, today's novel starts in 1990. So again, it's important to emphasize that these novels were crafted, planned, scheduled by John Updike to cover every 10 years. So, Rabbit Run is a saga of the 50s. It comes out in 1960. Rabbit Redux, the atonement of the 60s, comes out in 1971. My favorite, Rabbit is Rich, and a lot of people agree with me on this, by the way. I just watched something the day where a scholar said that Rabbit Rich is the best of the novels. Comes out in 1981. Of course, that's all about the 1970s, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, wrap that up a little bit. And then with the 80s into 1990 with Rabbit at Rest, he planned his novel so that they would be sociological documents of an era. I should also add spiritual documents of an era, because John Updike has his own views and about such matters, and they inform and influence everything he ever wrote. Every artist has opinions and convictions, of course, and those opinions and convictions go into what they create and what they unleash, if that's a word, or upon the world, or gifts given to the world. It's a hodgepodge of all these different influences. And so in that sense, I think that there's, what I'm saying, the main character, Harry Engstrom, is probably a lot like a lot of people walking around today. A lot more than we would, when I say a lot like, that is people in the world, actual world today. And that's, of course, good and bad. And, we'll talk a little bit. But anyhow, the reason why I have this queued up to this book TV as Brian Lamb's invention. Any of you folks know Brian Lamb? C-SPAN, or, yeah, so they had authors on for very long periods of time. Should I recite the Copyright Act? So the Copyright Act of 1976. Copyrighted material in this very episode is used for the purpose of commentary and criticism, and falls under the fair use doctrine of copyright law. And that, of course, is our copyright law of 1976. And this show is no exception, and we are going to look at a few clips here from Brian Lamb's, I think it's Brian Lamb's creation, although other people, this woman here was also a part of it. And why am I playing this particular clip? Well, there's a reason. As I said earlier in today's episode, John Updike was also a cartoonist, a budding cartoonist. Originally, that's what he had wanted to do, not write very highbrow, fine literature and prose, which he ended up doing. And he's interested in painting, and so that plays a role, because one of the call-in, they used to have call-in shows. This guy says, well, John Updike, what about visual art? What do you think? And of course, he has many important texts. Just Looking, Always Looking are two that come to mind. I think all in all, he released maybe 4 coffee table books on art and painting, which is incredible if you think about it. He's going to talk about one of them, but the reason why is that actually his Updike's visual intelligence, this is part of the training that he received. I described at the outset of this episode. Well educated, well trained, the people in that era. He knew art history. He knew painting. He knew sculpture. I mean, as much as he knew, Shakespeare or George Eliot or Flaubert or Henry James, which is incredible. I mean, think about that. I mean, these days people often only know one, maybe very narrow field if they know that at all. I mean, this is education level. Anyhow, he's trying to talk about here the relationship for him between visual art and prose. And they're often seen, rightfully so, I might add, because of all sorts of historical reasons, as rather different fields. And that's true. If you talk to painters and writers, they often see things quite differently, and I can vouch for that. All my life experience until this year, 57 years old, confirms that in all sorts of ways. But anything can be put alongside anything else. And of course, one of the missions and philosophies of this very podcast, Journey of an Aesthete, is that however different a medium is to another medium, for example, instrumental music, from my way of thinking, instrumental music is a very, very, very different affair than a sculpture, is a very, very different affair than a religious tract. It's actually in many ways opposite, right? Because a religious tract is telling you how to believe, what to think, and words on a page. And instrumental music could mean potentially anything. It's not an exact representation of reality in that way. However, having said that, instrumental music, as well as a Reinhold Niebuhr, I'm just pulling a name out of a hat, so don't sue me. Reinhold Niebuhr, Moral Man in the Moral Society, theological writing. There are similarities in that the instrumental music is created by a person, and Reinhold Niebuhr was a theologian, and he's writing creatively these words, even though they refer to the real world in a more direct way than instrumental music, of course. They're creations of human beings, and also, last but certainly not least, in a world of AI, which is our world now, taking over everything, it bears remembering that, see what it does? These platforms are driving me crazy. It bears mindfulness on our part that these are human creations. He's a human. This interviewer on the show is a human. I'm human. Reinhold Niebuhr was a human being, a man who wrote about religion and politics, and he wrote something. And instrumental music, if I write a sonatine for piano, I'm a person doing that, and that might actually, as we go forward in this this world in which we find ourselves now, that might become more and more critical and more important. So that's also something else to think about. So let's hear Updike talk about
returning to the literary life.
Our next call for you comes from San Diego. You're on for John Updike. Good afternoon.
Hi, Susan. How are you this morning?
Fine, thank you.
Always enjoy listening to you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Updike.
Good morning.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is, you may know that Tom Wolfe was on this show some 6 months ago or so.
Oh, sacred presence, yes.
Yeah. And his book, The Painted Word, kind of gave us a sort of a negative response, a kind of a tacit. He said that it was a tacit scam by the art critics and things to hike the value of art. And of course, on the back flap of your book, in the upper part of it there's a little quote by Arthur C. Danto, who praises the book with a little quietude. But he now has been for like 20 years promoting a negative aspect, is basically saying that art is dead today and has no real meaning for us anymore. So I want to ask, how can you remain positive while others go so negative in the pictorial arts?
Well, if you look at the new book, it's mostly painters and some sculptors who are long dead. I think the last school that I could relate to with excitement was pop art, which is quite a while ago now, but I loved pop art. It was kind of a relief after abstract expressionism, which I was afraid I wasn't quite getting. I lived in New York in the 50s and often went back to New York, and so I went to MoMA a fair amount and tried to keep up with what was in. And I enjoyed pop art because it seemed to me to do a little bit what I was trying to do in my fiction, which was glorify the ordinary, to tell Americans what they're really seeing, what they're really...
Okay. Pop art, Rauschenberg, the great Rauschenberg, and Warhol, and those folks in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He loves them because he claims, he heard it say itself, they're trying to do what he's trying to do in his fiction, which is take the stuff, quite literally the stuff of ordinary life, quotidian life, which is not, as all these novels make clear, and we're gonna, right after this clip, we're gonna jump into his prose where he's dealing with all of this stuff. Advertised brands, cars, Playboy magazines, deep pile shade carpeting, Toyotas. I mean, these novels he becomes a Toyota dealer. So Japan and Toyota vehicles, right? Billboards, advertisements, and Rabbit is Rich. There's tons of advertisements that this such and such a movie you could see is playing on the marquee. You could see that Saturday Night Fever is playing, and in the evening, Janice and Nelson and Harry will watch the episode of the Charlie's Angels, and which is what's on TV, and that's network television. All of these kinds of, you could call junky, lowbrow items of daily life, or all over the prose. And we'll find that out just now. So I don't know quite to go back or go forward. Let's hear a little bit more, because I think
among these artifacts, pop artifacts are like nature now. This is our grass and birds, the Coke bottles and Brillo boxes, things like that. But since then, I couldn't argue very strenuously with the notion that I wouldn't say art is dead, but art is drifting, certainly. It's drifting into various kinds of eclecticism, and it's a little... The trouble with it, in a way, is like what's wrong with a lot of writing, is that the writers have read too much, and there's too much backlog in their heads of the classics, or the would-be classics, and so it is in painting now. Every painter is ferociously conscious.
I'm turning this off because I don't want to play the much more of it. This here. We go from the image to the word, right? That's what we're going to do now. So we're gonna go. So where did we last leave off? So in Rabbit is Rich, the end of the novel, Harry Rabbit has a sexual encounter with Thelma Harrison, and that's actually one of the big scenes in the novel, and it's very graphic, and it goes on for many pages. And I don't want to read the sex descriptions necessarily, but I do want to read a couple of things they say to each other in between, I don't know, orgasms, and it's a long scene. I should add that, Updike's sex scenes are very explicit and graphic, and that many do not like them. But partially in his defense, he's very much influenced by another author who doesn't come in for the same sort of criticism. In fact, this other author is celebrated for the very same thing, and that's his old friend, Erica Jahn. John Updike was very deeply influenced by the novel Fear of Flying. Now, it's not to say that it all comes from Erica Jahn. I mean, he was already writing about sex in the 60s, but I do think that reading Fear of Flying and being impressed by the way Erica Jahn wrote about sex, I do think played a role. And, I can't prove this. It's just a guess. I'm not an expert, although I have read all these novels. I've read Fear of Flying. Played a role in how Updike writes about sexuality. So I'm trying to find the thing here because, let's see what we got here. Towards the end of the novel, 13, my glasses. All right. Okay, they're having sex. And they have a brief discussion, Thelma and Rabbit. Understand too that this was planned. It was planned by everybody. So this is the term would have been. They had terms like swapping at the time that were crude, but it's basically experimenting. And so Janice is, people would pair off with people outside of their marriage, and but that's kind of, I don't want to belabor that point. But they have a conversation. Of course, if you remember, everybody in this novel, all the males in this novel, want Cindy. I mean, so Cindy is like kind of, the quote would be the younger, hotter one, right? Cindy is, I don't know, from the description in this novel, is sort of the Ally McGraw, Margot Robbie, I don't know, just people from the era, Bo Derek, I don't know, but kind of the person that everybody notices. Phoebe Cates, actually, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, that kind of woman. But Thelma has her own point of view in this scene. I find it very interesting. Here's what Thelma says. Hold on a second here. I'm going to make sure that. All right. As you know, Harry Angstrom is never faithful to his major partners, his wives. He has a long affair with Ruth during his first marriage, and as we'll find out, maybe even has had a kid he doesn't know about with Ruth. And dialogue, okay, dialogue. When you deal with dialogue, they're talking about the kid, the son Nelson, and Harry protests, "Nelson's not like me. He's a goddamn little Springer through and through." Meaning that he takes after his wife Janice, the Springer family, more than his, that things that people say. Thelma thinks he's more like Harry than he knows, meaning Nelson. So Nelson's more like Harry than he knows. Wanting to learn to hang glide. Didn't he recognize himself in that? And the thing of two girls at once, Nelson was dating two girls at one time, reminds Thelma of Harry, of Rabbit. Wasn't he possibly a bit jealous of Nelson? Some dialogue here, quote, "But I never had the impulse to screw Melanie," he confesses, "or Prue either, much." Prue's, of course, Nelson's current current wife, or Prue either much. They're both out of this world somehow. Of course, Thelma says, you shouldn't want to fuck them. They're your daughters, or Cindy either. You should want to fuck me. I'm your generation. Harry, I can see you, and see is italicized. I can see you. To those girls, you're just an empty heap of years and money, unquote. So that's a kind of a strange discussion in the bedroom in which Thelma's saying, actually what I consider to be an extremely conventional point of view, that you have to be with your peers, you know, that Thelma's about the same age as Harry, and if you're 50, your partner's got to be 50, you know, heaven forbid your partner should not be 25 or 30, et cetera, these rules, these sort of beliefs and rules in society in this conversation. But it's also interesting, for many, many reasons. I mean, as a piece of dialogue, it's very economical on Updike's part as an author, because he's getting the essence of these two people who are together in this situation. And as you know, all this is interrupted. They can't stay on this fabulous vacation on this tropical, bucolic environment, because why? Nelson ran away. Nelson's run. So they got to go back to Pennsylvania because Nelson has fled. And it says that he runs. He's run, much like his father ran, rather. So that's more or less. And as it turns out, of course, Nelson just ran off from his responsibilities. He also steals a Corona. It says a great blue Celica Supra, the ultimate Toyota, with paddle dash, electric I don't even know these terms. Anybody knows? I'm not a car person. Let me slow this. This is Updike's genius of weaving prose out of the junk of life. So let's start over. Nelson having stolen his Corona, Harry has allocated to himself a great blue Celica Supra, the ultimate Toyota, quote unquote, with paddle dash, electric tachometer, state-of-the-art 4-speaker solid-state AM, FM, MPX stereo, quartz accurate digital clock, automatic overdrive transmission, cruise control, computer-tuned suspension, 10-inch disc brakes on all 4 wheels, and quartz halogen high-beam headlights. He loves this smooth machine. The Corona, for all of its dependable qualities, was just a stodgy little bug, whereas this blue buzzard has charisma. So this is Updike's a master at free and direct style, where, you know, you're not in dialogue, but the description weaves in and out of a character's point of view. So there's kind of a little bit playing with omniscience and then character omniscience. Or sometimes you're just fully in point of view without clearly announcing to the reader. One of the wonderful, I can't emphasize this enough, it's actually, I don't think I'd be overselling to say that these kind of styles in prose and grammar, indirect style and these free, is one of the greatest accomplishments of the human race in writing since there have been humans and there has even been writing. Just remarkable. And it's really, of course, the big names that really did this best, of course, are Flaubert and Henry James. And then, of course, Joyce carries it to this other level. And I should point out that in Updike, it's this kind of playfulness, this kind of with words and with prose and character point of view, that these items are the story, and that narrative story is always secondary to this kind of description, representation of the most interior consciousness of his character. So even in that passage of a man and a woman in bed talking, it's not just what they say in speech, but it's also what they is said about them in description. So these novels are a whole, and if you go forward, this There's a description. And Harry's going back over a part of the city. Now remember in Rabbit Redux when Rabbit meets Skeeter, the revolutionary, and the teen runaway, the girl who's the runaway and forms the commune. They met at a bar, and of course it makes an appearance at the very end of this novel, some 10, 11 years later. Jimbo's Friendly Lounge and Live Entertainment and Adult. Those are the neon signs. As he slid by in virgin blue grape skin, he was afraid some of them lounging in the cold might come out at a stoplight and scratch his hood with a screwdriver or smash his windshield with a hammer, taking vengeance. On a number of walls now in this part of town, you could see spray painted "Skeeter Lives," but they don't say where. So that's a description of this. And of course it mentions Donna Summer. He's listening to the radio. He moves the dial from left to right and back again. He can't find Donna Summer. She went out with the 70s. Instead, there was a guy singing hymns, squeezing the word Jesus until it drips. Interesting. So went out with the 70s. So again, we're in 1980 and already Harry's conscious that this bar doesn't exist anymore in the African-American part of town. It's not there anymore. And he misses Skeeter, and Skeeter lives, his old friend Skeeter, who he said he loved. And he can't even find Donna Summer because that's already passé. And he's talking about the 70s as if it were 5 or 6 years past, but it's only, he's barely out of them. So Harry goes to visit Ruth, and as always, when he visits Ruth, it's tense and unpleasant. And there's this very tense, very difficult. She talks about Annabelle, her daughter. And then it's the narrative, such as it is wrapped up by an announcement. I think it's here we go. A card from Nelson saying he's okay and saying where he is. There's a description of what's on television towards the very end of Rabbit is Rich. I think it's a football game. The Rams, okay, one of the major games, I'm sure, of the era. It says, at halftime, a lot of girls in colored dresses and guys that look like fags in striped jerseys dance. Again, point of view of this character, language. What you know, this is Harry Angstrom's what he's internalizes from his culture. In striped jerseys, dance while about 1,000 pieces of California brass imitate the old big bands with an off-key blare. These kids try to jitterbug, but they don't have the swing. That one beat weight back on your heels and then the twirl. They do a lot of disco wiggling instead. Then some little piece of sunshine with an Andrew Sisters Page Boy sings Sentimental Journey. But it just doesn't have that Doris Day wartime 40s soul. How could it? These kids were all born, can you believe it, around 1960 at the earliest, and worse yet, are sexually mature. Who needs Khomeini and his oil? Who needs Afghanistan? Fuck the Ruskies. Fuck the Japs for that matter. We'll go it alone from sea to shining sea. So what does that interior monologue remind you of today, that mindset? I don't want to, again, too on the nose, but you can see Updike, very concerned Updike is to depict, points of view that are profoundly mistaken and benighted and offensive because they're in his main character. The Ruskies, of course, this is the period of time of Afghanistan and The novel ends with the sentence, "Fortune's hostage, heart's desire a granddaughter, his, another nail in his coffin, his." And so that's concludes Rabbit is Rich, and we can go to Rabbit at Rest. And all right. Keeping with the aesthetic continuity of the other books, I find it so interesting that his novel of the 70s, said this before, it stands alone. The other ones, the other ones are kind of... So Rabbit at Rest is basically Harry Angstrom, Rabbit at the end of his life, more or less. And at the end of his life, having finished the 1980s, it's 1990. And so how does the novel open? Of course, at a Florida airport. Because what do people in their 60s do in 1990? Again, Updike is very much a sociologist. He's documenting what people do. Not what we would want them to do, or what we imagine them to do, but what they actually do. They're going to Florida at that time. And I can't relish this. The way he opens this novel, I'm going to read a lot of passages, so bear with me. I hope. See? FL, Florida, number 1. So he sets the tone of description. And again, in Updike's prose, these collages, these montages, these catalogs of quotidian life, the cultural, as Updike pointed out, as much as the natural, are as important in his novel and these novels as plot. They are a form of plot, and they are as important and a form of character and psychology itself. So that's it. Standing amid the tan, excited post-Christmas crowd at the Southwest Florida Regional Airport, Rabbit Angstrom has a funny sudden feeling that what he has come to meet, what's floating and unseen about to land, is not his son Nelson and daughter-in-law Prue and their 2 children, but something more ominous and intimately his own death, shaped vaguely like an airplane. The sensation chills him above and beyond the terminal air conditioning. But then facing Nelson has made him feel uneasy for 30 years. The airport is relatively new. You drive to it off exit 21 of Interstate 75, down 3 miles of divided highway that, for all the skinny palms and rows and groomed 2 green Bermuda grass at its sides, seems to lead nowhere. There are no billboards or self-advertised roadside enterprises or those low houses with cooling white tile roofs that are built by the acre down here. You think you made a mistake. An anxious red Camaro convertible is pushing in the rearview mirror. "Harry, there's no need to speed. We're early, if anything." That's Janice, of course. Janice, Rabbit's wife, said this to him on the way in. What rankled was the tolerant, careful tone she has lately adopted, as if he's prematurely senile. He looked over and watched her tuck back a stubborn, fluttering wisp of half-gray hair from her sun-toughened, little brown nut of a face. "Honey, I'm being tailgated," he explained, and eased back into the right lane and let the speedometer needle quiver past below 65. The Camaro convertible passed in a rush. A cocoa brown black chick in a gray felt stewardess's cap at the wheel, her chin and lips pushing forward. not giving him so much as a sideways glance. This rankled too. From the back, the way they designed the trunk and bumper, a Camaro seems to have a mouth, two fat metal lips parted as if to hiss. Hiss. So maybe Harry... Okay, so this is describing a car as a flight attendant in the car, in the Camaro. Gets to the terminal. Tailgating. So the terminal, when it shows up at last, is a long, low, white building, like a bigger version of the Sunstruck clinics. Dental, chiropractic, arthritic, cardiac, legal medical, that line the boulevards of the state dedicated to the old. You park at a lot only a few steps away from the door of sliding brown glass. The whole state babies you. Inside upstairs where the planes are met, the spaces are long and low and lined in tasteful felt gray, like that cocky stewardess's cap, and filled with the kind of music you become aware of only when the elevator stops or when the dentist stops drilling. Plucked strains, no vocals, music that's used to being ignored. So notice all the attention at, again, description of place. This airport, it's a new airport, by the way, just built probably a year. It's not Tabor International, it's this airport, right? Regional. And images having to do with healthcare and medicine and gerontology and being a senior and, of course, death, mortality, which it says the very first sentence, talks about death. There's always a embarrassment of riches in Updike, so it's very difficult to choose what passage to describe something that you feel is representative. So give me a second here. So I guess they meet Harry and Prue and all them. Calling him Grandpa, of course, because he's a grandfather now. They hurry after the others who have vanished. Judy's shiny berribboned head makes him nervous, popping up first on one side of him and then the other. So it's this, bopping up and down, this, like the car keys he was a little slow to find. Janice calls him daughtery when she can't even catch the clumsy mutt. If their granddaughter gets kidnapped from his side, she'll really call him daughtery. Easy does it, he tells Judy at the top of the escalator. Pick a step and stay on it, why don't you? Don't get on a crack. And at the bottom, okay, step off, but not too soon. Don't happen, it'll happen. Don't panic, it'll happen. Okay, good. I go on escalators all the time at the mall, she tells him, making up at him a little pinched, rebuking mouth with beads of melted chocolate at the corners. Where the hell is everybody? He asks her, for amid all the tan, loud presences that throng the lower, higher ceiling floor of the Southwest Florida Regional Airport, less duck-like and crypt-like, but still echoing with a muffled, steely doom that worries at his stomach, there is nobody he knows. Strangers as total as if he had descended into hell. Are we lost, Grandpa? We can't be, he tells her. Notice that long subordinate clause, and he has the need to not just say the airport, he has to say Southwest Florida Regional Airport, almost as if, you're advertising the damn thing and Rabbit or Harry's internalized that advertisement and the clunkiness of the language is just part of the art, what he's trying to create here in language. And the description of this little girl, you know, bouncing around and the escalator and all this kind of stuff. And there's even more description of the journey in the vehicle. So we got the airport, but look what Updike does. So committed he is to chronicling how we actually live. Again, not how we want to live, but what our streets and environments are like, the world we've created. So here we go. This is vintage Updike here. Of all the roads Harry has seen in his life, Route 41, the old Tamiami Trail, is easily the most steadily depressing. It is wider than commercial use. Unlimited access highways tend to be up north, and somehow the competitive roadside enterprise looks worse in constant sunlight, as if like plastic garbage bags, it will never rot away. Winn-Dixie, Publix, Eckerd Drugs, Kmart, Walmart, Taco Bell, Arc Plaza, Joy Food Store, Starvin' Marvin Discount Food, Wine, and Beer. Among the repeating franchises selling gasoline and groceries and liquor and drugs all mixed together in that peculiar lawless way they have down here, low, pale buildings cater especially to illness and age. Arthritic Rehabilitation Center, Nurse Finder Inc., Cardiac Rehabilitation Center, Chiropractics, Hearing Aids and Contact Lenses, West Coast Knee Center, Universal Prosthetics, National Cremation Society. On the telephone wires, instead of the sparrows and starlings you would see in Pennsylvania, lone hawks and buzzards sit. Banks, big structures in smoke glass, rise higher than the wires with their glossy self-advertisements. First Federal, Southeast. Burnett Bank with its super teller. Super teller is capitalized. I guess that means it's a certain kind of bank, and the teller is a super teller. I guess it's a drive. I don't know. These are things a little bit remote from my fullest comprehension. Just thought I don't know what that is. CNS proclaiming all services. Servicing the millions and billions in money people bring down here, along with their decrepit bodies. The loot of all those lifetimes flooding the sandy lowland, floating these big smoke glass superliners. Now, there's a visual dimension because that passage I just read, see? See there? He's trying to create like the neon, the Winn-Dixie, the Publix. He continues here. I'm sure some readers might say, well, why doesn't he get on with it? Why all this extravagant aesthetic description of these things? Right? There's a lot of dialogue, of course. They're trying to get reacquainted with his son. But there's a lot of course, in this novel, a lot of problems. There's health problems, which is prefigured by all this description of medical matters in the signs. Of course, chiefly our main character's health problems. He's going to have a heart attack in this novel. And then there are problems with his kid, Nelson. And I thought it'd be fun. I found a passage here. Let me see, where Janice has a conversation with her kid, her son, about this substance called cocaine. And it's quite a long, it's an actually remarkable dialogue, because not only for its length, but for what it depicts about a parent and an adult child, a mom and an adult child. I thought it'd be interesting to show that Updike is not he's not just somebody describing scenic all this political discussion. You might appreciate this. So let's see, Harry's talking. Who's he talking with? I don't know. Actually, it's one of his Florida buddies in this new environment. Bernie, what do you think? Harry asks. I'm talking about politics. Bernie's the wisest of the three. I think Bernie says, Dukakis tried to talk intelligently to the American people, and we aren't ready for it. Bush talked to us like we were a bunch of morons, and we ate it up. Can you imagine the Pledge of Allegiance, read my lips? Can you imagine such crap in this day and age? Ailes and those others, they make him into a lousy beer commercial. Head for the mountains. Bernie's saying this last phrase, his voice quaverly but touchingly true. Rabbit is impressed by this ability Jews, Bernie's one of this Jewish comport that he meets here in Florida, retired in Florida, seem to have to sing and to dance and give themselves to the moment. They sing at Seder, he knows, because Bernie and Fern had them to a Seder one April just before heading north. Passover. The angel of death passed over. Harry had never understood the word before. Let this cup pass from me. And then Bernie concludes, to my mind, there are two possibilities about Bush. He believed what he was saying, or he didn't. I don't know which is more terrifying. He's what we call a pisher. Yiddish word. So this is an exchange between a very liberal retiree, Bernie, and Harry Engstrom, who's much, of course, more conservative and right-wing. And it's Updike's way of showing a dialogue between these two men in Florida about local politics. And if there's any conclusion, the Bush he means is Bush Sr., long time ago, the Bush of the early 90s, before Clinton. That was an era of the first Desert Storm War, and it's interesting to think about all those things now. Of course, as I said, his novels form a document of the era, and of course, Updike is so brilliant because when he describes the lifestyle and practices of Bernie and his Jewish friends, he describes it from, again, the point of view of Harry's sort of quasi-anti-Semitic, if I can put it that way, alienation from it. It's like, these people brought me to this Seder, I don't know what this stuff is, and he gets all of that in the prose. There's no attempt whatsoever on Updike's part to sugarcoat any of this, and there's no attempt at bringing in some kind of phony omniscience. The reader has to do the work. Do the work also about who Dukakis was and who's right and who's wrong. I mean, it's never on the nose. You're to understand that Updike is siding with Bernie, of course, and not with his main character, Rabbit, and that Dukakis was the better candidate. But again, it's never preaches. It's just inner way of weaving the author's personal politics into these characters. And there's even a passage about how Rabbit liked Reagan. It says Rabbit liked Reagan. He liked the foggy voice, the smile, the big shoulders, the way his head kept wagging during the long pauses, the way he floated above the facts, knowing there was more to government than facts, and the way he could change direction while saying he was going straight ahead, pulling out of Beirut, getting cozy with Gorby. It's Gorbachev, getting cozy with Gorby. Running up the national debt. The strange thing was, except for the hopeless down and outers, the world became a better place under him. The communists fell apart, except for in Nicaragua, and even there he put them on the defensive. The guy had a magic touch. He was a dream man. Harry dares say, under Reagan, you know, it was like anesthesia. Harry, you ever have an operation, a real operation? Not really. Tonsils when I was a kid. Appendix when I was in the Army. They took it out in case I was sent to Korea. Then I was never sent. I had a quadruple bypass 3 years ago. I know, Bern. I remember you telling me. But you look great now. And then Bernie goes on. It's a beautiful description of his friend Bernie. Talking about his life. Passage dialogue. Bernie says, right, when you come out of anesthesia, it hurts like hell. You can't believe you can live with such pain. To get at your heart, they split your whole rib cage open. They crack you open like a coconut. And they pull the best veins they can find out of your upper leg. So when you come out of it, your groin's killing you as well as your chest. Wow. Harry inappropriately laughs, since while Bernie's talking to him on the cart, Ed, with that pompous, fussy sit-up he has, laying his hands on the club finger by finger like he's doing flower arrangements. So this scene is occurring while they're playing golf. Bernie and Harry are playing golf, I think, and discussing politics and discussing a bypass and things of life. Bernie says, 6 hours I was on that damn table. I woke up and I couldn't move. Bernie, and Bernie goes on. Bernie says, when I came out of that, it was like being on the edge of death. He says, this voice says, so honest to God, I think maybe it's the voice of God. Operation a success. Bernie, Bernie repeats, like it came out of the clouds to Abraham to go cut Isaac's throat. So he's describing, going long passage describing this bypass. And I guess what Bernie's telling him is, you say Reagan is like anesthesia, but anesthesia is not, what is, it's trying to very gently correct Harry's retrograde, proto-right-wing view of the world in Florida playing golf. So I like that. So I promised I would discuss the cocaine discussion, and we'll do it. There's mention of the Wonder Years and Night Court is what the TV they're watching. Again, the era. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. I'm just trying to get the exact. Okay, 148 and 152. Page 148, so it more or less stops. Now, as I said before, this is Janice talking to her kid Nelson. And Nelson has really, really been behaving in the most irresponsible way. He is stereotype of a troubled person, guy. And so Janice is going to corner him, right? I don't know quite where to say here. Janice prompts Nelson. This is an in medias res. I apologize for that. You don't seem that relaxed, she adds. You were a tense child, Nelson. You took everything so very seriously. Nelson says rapidly, how else are you supposed to take it? Like a big joke like Dad does? As if the fucking world is nothing but a love letter to yours truly. Janice goes on. Let's try to keep talking about you, not your father. As you say, I'm a simple woman. Not sharp, not tough. I'm very ignorant about a lot of things. The simplest thing about this, like how much it takes and how much it costs. I don't even know how you take it. Is it up the nose or smoke it? Or what you put in to smoke it or any of that? All I know about cocaine is what's on Miami Vice. TV show Miami Vice. And the talk shows. And they don't explain very much. It's just not something I ever thought would make a difference in my life. His embarrassment increases, she sees, as when he was 6 and sick, and she would quiz him about his bowel movements. Or once when he was 14, and she mentioned the stains on his bed sheets. So see what Updike is doing? They're having a conversation about an adult person's drug use, and then the mom goes back and thinks about wet dreams and of her son, and also about, bowel movements and these things about being a mother, these most intimate, most bodily, as cocaine use itself is of course bodily and intimate. You're putting things in your body, up your nose, and just he's putting all these things together. Just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. But he wants to talk, she also sees, about these details to show off the knowledge his manhood has obtained. He sighs in surrender and closes his eyes and says, quote, "It's hard to describe. You know that expression about drunks, feeling no pain? After a hit, I feel no pain. I guess that means I feel pain the rest of the time. Everything goes from black and white to color. Everything is more intense and more hopeful. You see the world the way it was meant to be." This last confidence is so intimate, the boy bats his eyelids, his lashes long as a girl's, and blushes. Janice feels slightly queasy, brought this closer to something neutral and undecided in her son's sexual nature, something scared out of him, and brings her legs up on the sofa under her, the short skirt hiking up above the knees. Her legs are still firm and trim at 52, her best feature as a girl and a woman, her legs having always been skimpy and her breasts small and her face nondescript. She especially loves her legs here in Florida, where they turn brown and compare favorably with those of the other women who have let themselves get out of shape or never had a shape to start with. These Jewish women tend to have piano legs and low lips, she thinks. Letting her son enjoy her ignorance, Janice asks, "How many of these snorts do you need at a time to feel the bright colors?" Nelson laughs, superior. "They're called lines, Mom. Mom, if you snort them, you chop up this powder with a razor blade on a mirror, usually, and make them into lines about 1/8 of an inch wide and 1 inch or 2 long. You inhale them into your nose with a straw or a glass tutor you can buy at these places down in Brewer near the bridge. Some of the guys use a rolled up dollar bill. If, say, it's a $100 bill, that's considered cool." He smiles, remembering these crisp, glittering procedures among friends in their condos and apartments in the high northern section of Brewer, backing up to Mount Judge. His mother asks, "Does Prue do this with you?" His face clouds. "She used to, but she stopped when she was pregnant with Roy, and then didn't take it up again. She's become quite rigid. She says it destroys people." Is she right? Some people, but not really. So it goes on, and basically the upshot is that the dialogue scene, mother and son, goes on for many more pages, actually. And Nelson basically is giving her bullshit. I mean, the bullshit being that this is good for me. Again, this is the kind of crap, that this, you see things clearly as the way they actually are when you do a line and all this way, these self-serving things. And we discuss crack and then go on. And of course, Nelson says, cocaine is he says, the cleanest of them all. And the people who use it are the successes in the world by and large. It keeps them successful and keeps them sharp. So he goes on and on about how great this is. Now, if you jump ahead to book 5, Rabbit Remembered, Nelson is, hope I'm not spoiling too much, is going to become a therapist and a counselor. But this, of course, is earlier on. This is 1989, 1990, and it's a different period of his life. I have one little more descriptive passage of Rabbit's thinking. Interesting. Harry Angstrom's musing about stuff. And maybe some of Janice, because we just met in this novel. We're meeting Janice in all these novels, and there's it's just interesting. Some Rabbit here. On a sunny day, talking about the professionals. So the downtown is mostly parking space, but the strange thing is that space is all full. Though there is little to shop at downtown anymore except for some discount drugstores and a 5 and dime that still peddles parakeet food and plastic barrettes to old people who haven't changed clothes since 1942. We're back in Pennsylvania now. We left Florida, I think. 1942, the number of trim youngest professionals in lightweight suits and tight linen skirts has ballooned. They work in the banks and insurance companies and state and federal agencies, and there is no end of them somehow. On a sunny day, they fill the woodsy park. The city planners, not local, a fancy architectural firm that came in and won the competition with their design and then flew back to Atlanta, have made out of Weiser Square, where the squeaking, sparkling trolley cars used to line up for the passengers. They bask, these young paper pushers, beside the abstract cement fountains, reading the Wall Street Journal, with their coats off and neatly folded on the anodized, vandal-proof benches beside them. The women of this race especially fascinate Harry. They wear running shoes instead of high heels, but their legs are encased in sheer pantyhose, and their faces adorned by big round glasses. Big round glasses that give them a comical, sexy look, as if their boobs are being echoed above in hard horn rims in coated plastic. They look like Goldie Hawns as conditioned by Jane Fonda. The style these days gives them all these wide, mannish shoulder pads, and their hips have been pared and hardened by exercise bicycles, and those ass-hugging pants, and hardened by exercise bicycles and those ass-hugging pants that mold around every muscle like electric-colored paint. These women seem visitors from a slimmed-down future where sex is just another exercise, and we all live in sealed cubicles and communicate through computers. So Rabbit's thinking to himself, and this was written in 1989, 1990, just perspective. And the character, Harry says, these strange women, these people, seem to live in sealed cubicles and communicate through computers in the future. So, interesting. All of these descriptions, the point of view of Harry, all of them, are thoroughly, to use a vogue word, problematic. All of them. And yet they're aesthetically interesting and they're psychologically interesting. So that's kind of a part of Rabbit at Rest. I'm going to stop there. we're going to return to this novel in our next episode. But I'm interested, of course, in trying to get some of these topical political things, discussions of Dukakis and Herbert Walker Bush, and earlier on Afghanistan in 1979-80, just to get a sense of how characters respond to events and how they interpret them. And of course, the Florida environment of all these retirees. So I want you to thank everybody for coming out and watching this and joining us and joining us in the podcast. Episode 5 of the Rabbit series, we will continue with Rabbit at Rest, and we will, of course, discuss the novella Rabbit Remembered. And maybe watch some more of Updike talking about his life and work. And thank you for coming out. And I hope you all have a good weekend. If not only just a decent weekend, but maybe even a great weekend, if at all possible. We do wish that for you, and thank you, and to be continued.